Welcome to TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. This podcast is about your work as a caring professional and the ideas that we can share to elevate and expand what we do to ensure that all of those that we serve get the best of what we have to offer. My name is Dr. Tim Gravoy, Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm very, very excited to introduce my friend, Theresa Mary Fischer, who is the Product Marketing Manager at SimpleView, located here in Tucson, Arizona. So I first met Theresa when, for the first time as an educator, I had to consider that school leaders have audiences and we need to reach them and that they might be different and have different things that they care about. And just that idea that reaching audiences is important to building the relationships that we want as school leaders. And so, Theresa, I invited you on the show today because you just have a long and beautiful career of helping all kinds of leaders, and me as being one of them, uncover, discover, and if necessary, perhaps recover their many audiences. And you were very, very helpful to me as I got started in this. And I guess I'm wondering, what could you tell us a bit about yourself and kind of what you're up to these days?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm a product marketing manager. So what I do is what's called targeting market audiences, which is very similar to what you're talking about as far as audiences and being at the place where they need what we have, right? So, and that's very much what's important to educators as well, is where is that message going to be, and how are you going to reach people? On a personal level, I volunteer with Startup Tucson. That's really fun for me. I'm a mentor, and I help them when they've gone through the program, and then they meet with me again to talk about target markets and market audiences. And one of the things we talk a lot about is personas, which maybe we'll be able to touch on a little bit in our conversation today.
Ooh, that would be delicious if we could, actually.
Absolutely. And then I have a garden in my yard, and that keeps me super, super happy.
Oh my goodness. I want to be the kind of person who has a garden that keeps them super, super, super happy. I just don't think my ADHD is going to let me do that. Like I'm not that flavor. I do have like 12 chickens though that are running around in my office right now. So that's been
awesome.
Yes, it is. That's a different kind of happiness with the outdoors for sure. But that's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing it. Just thank you for sharing what you do and for being there to support other folks who are trying to find these audiences and figure this out in such a wonderful way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering then, just as we get started, do you think you could frame maybe a little bit about what we're talking about when we're saying that schools have audiences?
Schools definitely have audiences, and they're very big, from the school district to really small, the person who wants to be a janitor at your school. And there's all of them have different purposes and intents. So a parent who lives in that area is taking a look at, is that a school I want my kids to go to? Because we have more options now with education on where your kids can go to school. They can choose, a basics kind of school, or like the school that's down the street that's great and easy so the kid can walk to school. But your other audiences are potential teachers. So you are wanting to put your school in the light that a teacher says, okay, this is a place where my values are going to be valued. My education experience is going to be valued. They're people that are like me. And here's kind of what their outreach looks like. And then as far as principals go, they've got a lot of stakeholders. Schools sometimes need external money that doesn't look like parents writing a check. Like they might want to get a sponsorship for an event, or they might need to do some rehab in something and there isn't the money for it, and they know it's something that's good. For example, I used to live near Miles, and Miles Elementary School has a garden, and so people will bring things and help and support. So then also your audience is your local community. Like I lived in that neighborhood and don't have children, but I very much appreciated that Miles had a garden. So but I think what a lot of people with what I've learned along the way in my career is audiences. People think everybody's your audience, and everybody is not your audience. And that's why it's really important to figure out who your different audiences are, and then how do you speak to them.
So let's follow up on that just a little bit then, because there's this, on one hand, that you talked about almost everybody that could be part of a school community as potentially being an audience for you. And yet an audience really can't be everyone. It can't be everyone. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I can use an example of, City High School. So you and I work together at City High School. They have a very different curriculum. They have a really different style. The teachers might be operate differently or think differently than maybe a school, in the outskirts of Phoenix or maybe in Vale, and there's just a different flavor. How do you structure your classroom? If you're like really like, desks in a row versus let's all sit around in beanbag chairs, those are different kinds of teachers. And so when you're maybe recruiting or trying to support your teachers as an audience inside your school, like we want to celebrate them, how do you talk to them? And you talk to them very differently than you do the schools that want the desks lined up versus the beanbag chairs sitting on the floor reading books. And those are just socially very different audiences. And so when you're an educator in a school, and you have to really understand the flavor of your school, of your property, what you offer. You've got chickens running around, that might not be something normal at some other school. That might make no sense. That might feel like chaos to them. So that order and unorder. So knowing and understanding what it is that you offer as big picture, like a package, like what do we offer, and knowing what you don't offer. And that's super important too. These are the things that we don't offer. We don't offer locked libraries. We don't offer we only serve vegetarian food. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that look like a flavor. And then getting your arms around those things can help you tell your story to whoever and whatever audience that you're wanting to reach out to.
So it's almost as though if we could imagine our school as being just one singular person. No, it isn't. Of course it isn't.
No.
But if we somehow boil it down to being one singular person, what is their personality? What is our school's personality? And once we kind of understand ourselves in that way, it becomes a little bit easier to reach out to all of the different people that might want to connect with us. And although, yeah, I want to talk to as many people as widely as I can, I can't talk to different people the same way. That just isn't going to work any more than teaching every single student in a classroom exactly the same way works. Right. We know it doesn't. So like that's so it sounds like then like we're having like to say that we have audiences is really just to kind of acknowledge that we've got different people in our school community.
Yes, but I think something that you just touched on, which is really the most important part, is when I think of what you just said, the personality, we call that a persona. And that's a word that we use in marketing a lot. I use that at Startup Tucson, where as a mentor, when they come to me, they say, okay, my audience is everybody. And I'm like, your audience isn't everybody. So let's see, let's make up a person that exemplifies who you would want to reach. So I have a fun example. I was working with a soup company, and it's completely organic, no chemicals, no pesticides, completely fresh. It expires very quickly because it is so fresh. Mm-hmm. And as we started discussing who is your audience, and we realized like it's a person who's on the go, who wants to eat fresh food fast, probably has a very busy schedule. And then we started figuring out what is that age group of that person. And it's a female, and it's this age group, and they probably do hot yoga. And they get home, they're climbing in their corporate ladder, and they're, trying to figure out who they are, and they're growing in their career, and they volunteer a lot. They need healthy food after their hot yoga class, but they don't want something that's unhealthy. So we were like, oh, that's what that person looks like. And then I said, okay, do they have pets? Do they drive a car? Do they, where do they volunteer? And then once you have what this person looks like, now you go find them. And it's much easier to find them once you have your persona. And as far as the school having a flavor of a person, and that's super helpful, because once you kind of create that persona, you can say, you know what, it looks like this person looks like this, and we want more of these as teachers. We want more of these people who like these kind of people to work in our administrative office. We want more of these types of people that kind of look like the parents of the kids that are going to come to our school. Mm-hmm. And so as far as audiences, to me, that's a completely different thing. Your audience is all the people that like want to reach that person, but the bigger question is, how do you reach them? So I'm kind of shifting a little bit, maybe if you want to regroup to another.
No, but that kind of really makes sense there. That word persona, I'll tell you what, there is none of us in our teacher ed program or in our principal ed program or any doctorate program in education that's going to encounter the word persona in the way that a marketing professional is going to encounter that word. Yeah. But really what it comes down to is just there's all of these people that you just don't know yet and haven't met yet and haven't talked to yet, but you could probably imagine on some level what they're like and what they care
Yeah,
about. And if we can think about what they like and what they care about, we can craft our messaging to them with a lot more empathy and just with a lot more and I'm trying not to say the word targeted, but I guess that's the best way to say it. We could
it
just
is.
be more,
You can say what they care about. And
yeah.
that's what targeting is reaching somebody at a place at the right time when they care about something and you have something to help them solve whatever it is that they care about. Whether it's, I need a job as a teacher, I need a job as a line cook at a school, I want to be a principal. When you're out there showing what this new persona, this persona looks like, somebody's like, I totally love this kind of person. I totally want to be in that vibe. I want to be around people like me. I am that person. I want to connect with them, and that's my tribe. I want to be with my tribe. We all want to be with our tribe. We want to be with the people who make us feel safe and comfortable, especially safe in this world.
So it sounds like I ask maybe a question that's a bit spicier than intended here, but it might be it might be important just to think about, because so this idea of like thinking about a person I haven't even met yet and crafting messages to them, and I wonder, have you ever run across maybe in your practice a client who thought they had an idea of who that persona was that they were trying to reach, who really thought they had an idea of what their audience was and what they cared about, but was just spectacularly wrong?
I could probably say almost every single time it's because when it's yours and you're protecting it and you want to show it off to the world, even a school, you have these assumptions from your own head instead of taking a look outside of yourself. And so I think that's with everything, as just like removing yourself from your own personal identity and what you think things are, and taking a look at the broader picture, and then creating that persona. So I'll go back to the soup example. She was very sure it was a dad with kids that and I said, I don't think it's a dad with kids. And then I said, maybe a litmus test is to go and take a look at who's following you on social media. And she's like, oh, it's all females. So like, there's some easy ways to go take a look at, what are my assumptions? Am I correct? And you can also do testing in marketing. We do A/B testing all the time. But that's a lot of work. And most people don't have that much bandwidth. I do this for a living, so I think about this constantly. Is like, do I think that my target market is a very, a young family, mom and a dad and 3 kids, or is my goal family, more liberal, maybe 2 dads and a couple of kids and an adopted niece that moved into the house. Like, those are very different families, very different structures. They live in very different parts of town. And it's just the way that it is. People, like I said, tribes. You're going to go live in the neighborhood that's going to be your neighborhood. It's going to feel safe and comfortable because people are more like you.
So the A/B testing is again another one of those things that I learned from you in this whole marketing space, really, that I never had to think about as an educator at all. And so I'm going to just do my best to, in like 3 sentences, explain A/B testing, and you tell me all the ways to get it wrong. Like in my head, like when I'm thinking about an A/B test, it's like, you know what? I think I've got a good sense of who it is who's trying to enroll in my school, or who it is that wants to go to my workshop, or who it is but I might not exactly be sure. And so maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to send, maybe I'm going to do this kind of Facebook post and see who gets it. And then I'm going to do this kind of Facebook post and see who responds. And then from that, I'm not getting to know my audience based on hunches. I'm getting to know my audience based on their own response to what I'm putting out. And that actually, I think, it might be a lot more useful to school leaders than they might know right now. Just say, hey, what if I want everybody to, buy the school t-shirt, what is the best way to communicate that? And we've got some probably some database ways of figuring that out. And one could be, okay, well, how many orders did we get through Facebook? How many orders did we get through the newsletter? And
Exactly.
that would just tell us. Now, I don't know. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't do both. It just means that we just have a better sense of where the different parts of our audiences tend to get the information from us, and we just kind of get to know them a bit better.
Yes, and two kinds of messaging is empathy. You know, there's empathetic message, and then there's the educational message. And then as far as imagery goes, do you show a bunch of, like you're using example, just show a, you know, a nice array of t-shirts versus kids in the t-shirts playing on a playground, or a parent and a kid wearing the t-shirts and reading a book together. So, you know, like so you've got choices in your message. You know, in social media, you have like 15 seconds to make an impression. An email, you might have a little bit longer, but you actually have to get them to open it. So those are lots of different conversations that we could dive into for hours on those. But as far as social media, images are everything, but your captions are of course important, but is that, once you figured out who that person is, would they like that image? Would that resonate with them? Would they think, oh, that's kind of me, I want to engage more in this? I might open it. I might go do the next thing, which is, you know, the link that you have in your social media for somebody to go do more things, you know, donate money, go to the web page, follow us on another social channel, you know, what we call the call to action. What's the CTA? What do you want people to do?
Well, and that call to action is another one of those things where we never learned in educator school, no matter what our role in schools is, but it really does make a lot of sense. Like when you boil it down to whatever it is that you're trying to do, what is it that you want the person who receives your message to do, and what can we do to make that as clear as possible? But also sometimes we may discover we're actually asking our audience too much, and do we need to kind of pare down that call to action into something a bit more bite-sized that they might be a bit more ready for? Like they might not be ready to sign up for a tour on Thursday at 10. They might not be ready for that, but they might be, you know, ready to receive a brochure. That might be a much easier way to get to know somebody for the very first time. So that's really, really neat.
Or they might just be willing just to go follow your social channel today. You know, that might be it. I do a lot of marketing campaigns where I have 2 CTAs because they're very much sales. It's like, I want you to go buy something, but you're not going to click on the demo form and fill out a demo form if you're not ready to come talk to me. So, you know, the business. So I offer a brochure, some information, and I take a look at how many people open that. And I think, okay, well, there's some interest there. That's great. And I do see this a lot where businesses, educations groups, you have a lot to say. You put these gigantic newsletters together and you send it to everybody in the database with 47 things that somebody could do, instead of saying your parents, your community member. And I know it's much more work, and I recognize it's a lot of work to segment your database when you're doing emails. And I know that on social media, a lot of schools will have different kinds of groups. And I'll go back to City because I've been following them forever. So City High School has one that's just the kids. They're on Instagram. That's the only channel they're going to be on. And so they know their audience. That's where they are. They're not going to post on Facebook to reach a teenager. The only teenagers on Facebook is because Nana and their aunts live in New Jersey and they want to see pictures. Like it's so it's based. So that's back to the audience and where do you reach them, knowing how to reach them and where to reach them.
Well, I think that is just a lot to think about, and I think it would be a great time for us. Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about a little bit more about, okay, so we have all of these different audiences. We have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of platforms that any person because most schools do not have a person whose job it is to message. Right? It really is usually the busiest person at the school, the principal, who is in charge of all of this somehow, some way. And so how might we actually go about this and making it concrete in a school flavor kind of way? I would love to talk about that a bit more with you when we come back.
Great.
Are you searching for meaningful ways to contribute to your community? Support the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona, where every donation goes towards restoring dignity, health, opportunity, and hope to those living in poverty. The Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona's mission is to change lives by feeding the hungry today and building a healthy, hunger-free tomorrow. With programs like emergency food assistance, free meals, farmers markets, and nutrition education, we're not just providing meals, we're nurturing communities. Join the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona in creating a brighter tomorrow. Visit Community Food Bank today at www.communityfoodbank.org and see how you can make a difference. Together, we can feed hope and nourish lives. Well, welcome back. So, Theresa, we were talking about just this idea of needing to communicate, needing to really be very intentional about understanding, number one, that our school community is full of many different audiences who are seeking to connect with us on many different levels and in different ways, and we can't be messaging to every single one of them the same. And also just number two, the idea that like everybody can't be our audience. Like we're going to have to really be intentional and clear and talk to people the way they want to be talked to, and understand that everybody on our email list is not the same by any means. So I just kind of want to get a bit concrete with that if we can, because I have lots of extra time to develop new social media and marketing skills and segment all of my email lists into different groups, and what they care about is something that no educator has ever said, ever. I've never known a principal who's got gobs of extra time for this. And I'm just wondering, what might be the best way to get started with kind of knowing your audiences and reaching them more effectively be, if, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes a week is really all you got if you're lucky.
Well, I think 30 minutes would be plenty, which sounds kind of daunting because a principal has objectives. They have certain objectives. You to fill the school, make sure the staff is happy. They've got a list of a million things that they need to have as objectives. But what are those one or two things that are in the immediate future? So everything I do is 5 months or 6 months down the road, working myself backwards. So you're in January, and you're going to have open enrollment in May. So, I think that's correct. And so how do you work backwards from May? So May is that month, that where you need to go get people to come in and take tours. So planning to reach that audience when you know that they're ready. That's where our parents thinking about May in January, maybe not. When are parents starting to think about May? And then when is that time frame? And if you can build an annual calendar of just like every month, you are planning for what you need to reach them with. So you do your fund drives and your fundraising, and you get your tax credits. You hit them in December, January. So that gets in that calendar. Okay, then you say, okay, here's the objectives. Here's 12. Okay, here's 12. How are all of those objectives? Those are the top ones for me. How do you work backwards from those? So when are you messaging, just for example, the tax credit? That's a really cool thing, and a lot of people take advantage of that. So when are people ready to hear about that? That's when you go, and I say hit, which is the bad marketing language, but that's when you go talk to them. You go talk to them when they're ready to hear about it. And maybe a little before they're ready to hear about it, like, oh yeah, I forgot, I got to remember to do that before the end of December. I got to, or April or whatever those dates are. So if you can take your key objectives as a topic educator, map it out in a year, and you've got a half an hour a month, that gives you 2 hours a month to just, plan it, think about it. What are those key messages? And then decide if it's educational or empathy. I know there's lots of other emotions that are out there and different things that you can think about it. But those are the two things. Are you going to reach them because they care, or are you going to reach them because they want to be educated on something and it's super important to them? So then you just pick those. You could do some A/B testing, but then that means that you've got 1/2 hour less because you're doing more than. But I think over time, if this calendar is annual, you are going to learn from that calendar, and the next year's calendar is going to be a piece of cake.
And so really what you're talking about is essentially a content calendar, which there's like a million Google templates that you could do. But the simplest ones that I've seen is the one that honestly I continue to use, where it really just is, what's the message, what's the content, what's the graphic for it going to be. And, it literally is just a calendar that I have on a spreadsheet. And what helps with that is that you can all plan that in advance. And there's a lot of tools on Instagram and Facebook and other platforms too, where you don't have to post on Thursday for something that you want posted on Thursday. You can schedule it so it goes out in advance. And that might be a really good way to use that calendar for sure. But actually, Theresa, I think the tax credit is actually a really great example of audiences, And because just real quick for anyone who's not in Arizona does this thing where you can write a check for up to a certain amount of money to a school, and then you get that money back off of your state income tax. So it's a really neat thing. You get to essentially decide where your tax money goes. Like you're going to have to pay it anyway, so it may as well go to a school that you care about. And so that's a great example of a whole audience that might be ready to support your school for some reason, even if they don't have kids or even if they don't attend. They don't have to have any necessarily like reason to walk through your doors at all. They just have to really think that what you do is cool. And messaging to them about all the amazing things that you do and giving them a reason to want to support is a great example, I think, of thinking of an audience that isn't necessarily a prospective family or a prospective teacher or someone like that. So I think that one is really neat. So I'm wondering then, kind of along with that idea of, hey, have a calendar, have some time out, really think ahead of. You can't message about everything. You probably shouldn't anyway.
Yeah.
What like what are those things that you want to, and just put it on a calendar and just kind of committing to whatever of that you can get done. Imagine that you were working with a school principal as a client, in the same kind of way you work with your client who sells the soup. And they wanted to reach all of these new audiences effectively. What would you assign to them as their top 3 do it every day communications tasks? Like just every single day, here's 3 things for you to do to make sure that you're reaching your audiences effectively.
Well, I think you'd start with the persona.
Okay.
Most people would probably figure out that they can pick out more than one, maybe 3. And then figure out the vehicles that are the best ways to reach those.
Okay.
And then make a decision on bandwidth. So maybe you do not ever need to be on X. There might be a platform you're like, that makes no sense to me. My audience is just they're not gonna, what I'm putting out there and telling as a communication is just not going to be what they're interested in on that channel. So, I see a lot of people trying to do TikTok trends, and it's like, you're not talking to your target audience. Don't waste your time with those. It sounds like fun, but I don't think everybody has that much time to stay relevant, because once you make a commitment to a social channel, if you're not posting regularly, you disappear. That's how the algorithm works. You just disappear. And unless somebody goes searching for you again, you're not going to pop back up. So that's I would say the third thing is figuring out the time commitment of where do you want, if you do a newsletter once a month, that's great. What are going to be your key messages in that? And who are you talking to? And maybe you have sections that say parents, or maybe you just have a separate parents newsletter, which a lot of schools do, because it's just a completely different message than Mrs. Jones down the street who sees the kids walk by every day and she signs up because she just wants to know, this is my neighborhood. I want to know what's going on at this school that I see the teenagers walking home every day.
That there might be some community events, there might be certain things. So just really in thinking through then that your number one task to do is figure out maybe 2 or 3 different personas that you have, and really thinking again of like that persona is essentially boiling down that group that is in your school community down to one kind of person, and imagining talking to that one person a bit and figuring out, okay, well, what social media do they have? What interests do they actually have in getting this email newsletter? And if they did sign up, what could you write to them that's not going to get them to click unsubscribe? What is it that you can actually offer? That would be kind of that number one task. And then then the second task is really just kind of figuring out what platforms.
Yeah. And the call to action too. So what do you want Mrs. Jones down the street who sees the teenagers go by? Maybe she's a tax credit person. Maybe she's going to come to your art opening that the kids do because they're community minded. So once you figure out those personas, and say, well, what would you like them to do? And it's not write a check all the time. It's come by and see our art show. The kids are doing a trash cleanup day, and they've adopted the neighborhood street, and you want the community to come over and be part of that too, so that there's lots, intergenerational is really important for human growth. So thinking about what would you like them to do, and then how would you like them to talk about you, because what you're telling them about yourself is what they're going to share with friends and family. So when you figure out that audience. Remember, that audience is everyone else they're talking to.
And that's a really important thing to think about too, is that call to action is being like, really, what do you want your audience to do? What do you want someone in that group to do? And it kind of connects to another thing I hear a lot when I work with schools. Schools will tell me things like, we just don't see the parents' engagement we would like. And I'll ask a question, well, what would you like parents to do? If
Right.
they were engaged, what are they doing? Are they visiting classrooms? Are they, signing field? Like what is it exactly that you'd like to see more of? Imagine you had every single parent suddenly showing up, tomorrow to volunteer. I'm not sure that's exactly what you mean. You're by,
Exactly.
by parents' engagement. So like really kind of thinking through, okay, let's say that message gets there and it lands and it's successful and they're ready to do whatever I could wave my magic wand and ask for. No, but being really clear about what it is that we're asking for can really add some sparkle to the messaging as well. And then just that last one of, for being realistic about what I can and can't do. There are some schools, I don't know how they're doing it. They must have found some way to hire a social media person because they're posting 2 or 3 times a day. Because I just don't know a principal who can do that at all.
No.
But I do know many principals who are very good about sharing once a week
Yeah.
something about their students, and then once a week, just informational kinds of things, and then once a week, something that they're proud of their staff for. So they hit 3 audiences once a week, and they're just consistent with that. And that, and those are showing up like on my feeds when I'm following those schools a little bit more. So thanks. That's really kind of neat. I got a spicy one for you, and I'm kind of wondering what you might think about this one. What would you say is the #1 overrated practice in social media that you just think schools should probably stop? And why would you say so?
I would say insane trends. Don't bother wasting your time on insane trends like dumping buckets of water on people's heads and things like that, because I know that was a while ago as an example, but if you have a limited amount of time, you have a lot of messages to share. And so you steal bandwidth by putting something like that takes a lot of time. Like some people putting TikTok videos together is like, people think, oh, this is so easy. I mean, I know people who spend hours putting together, a 2-second clip. You don't have that time. So stay relevant on what your audiences are wanting to see. And like basically like what you said about that principal that's doing like 3 different kinds of posts. If I was watching that channel and I saw those 3 posts, it would tell me a lot about that school. What that principal has shared is, what does our school look like? Back to the persona. That's what we value. That's what we care about. That's who we are. If you walk into this school, those 3 things that I just shared, you're going to feel those things. That's who we are.
So we see all of those trends, and they're fun to watch, like on our own Instagrams, our own TikToks, our own kind of, when we're watching those, and they're neat and they're fun. But unless it lines up directly with the message that I want to say, it might not be the most effective way to communicate. Like it's one of those things where you might get a lot of eyes on it, but it's not saying anything that actually matters to you. And not only that, it takes a lot of time.
It does take a lot of time. And one of the words that you used, which I think is so important, is for people to remember to be intentional. Be very intentional about what you're posting. And not everything has a call to action, but it has a future call to action. So what you're posting right now is going to affect how people feel about you in the future.
I better have a point. I better have a point and add value of some kind, and not just be a reason to hit my 1 post a day kind of thing too. So I really
a social media manager, that's a whole other thing, because you can have fluff in your social channel, but you don't have, I'm guessing most people, like you mentioned, they don't have that. And so, like I said, be intentional.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break, and then when we come back, let's have a final thought from Theresa Mary Fischer from Simple View, just on anything that just has come up on all the ground that we've covered today. So working on this podcast has been a lot of fun, and I hope you're getting some great ideas for how to get your message out. But I'll tell you what, one of the other things that you might be feeling right now are these costs of caring. Especially for those of us who work in schools, the cost of caring is absolutely exorbitant. And it's a lot bigger and a lot more nuanced and complex than what a casual self-care workshop really can fix. Now, I've got an online course like many other folks, but I'll tell you what, for $37, I'm going to tackle these issues directly, giving you the strategies that you need to overcome compassion fatigue, overcome secondary traumatic stress, to overcome burnout, and really address these root causes of moral injury by stepping into your power and using some strategies that anybody can learn. Now, this is very different than a self-care workshop where someone's going to lead you through some Zoom exercises on breathing. I promise you, no one's going to make you eat more vegetables or tell you to drink more water here. This is going to be a really powerful way for you to step into power in the way that matters to you, to take care of yourself and guard against these costs of caring. And make sure that, given that we work at a job that'll take 180% of us if we let it, that we absolutely are doing our best to create healthy boundaries. So what I want you to do is go ahead, check out the link, sign up for the course. If you need help paying for it, send me a message and we'll help you out. All right, well, welcome back, Theresa. It's been absolutely great to talk with you today. And I'm just wondering, given all of the ground we've covered, what final thought might you have for us?
I said, think in the future. So what do, like, one of the things you mentioned was about like parent engagement. So if I worked in PR before, and I would reach with a client and I'd say, when we finish this project and we do all this work and we do all this thinking, if there was going to be a headline in the news or a headline in, a social post, what would it be? And so you'd say, okay, this is the goal. 75% of our parents showed up for student parent night. Like, there's your goal. How do you work backwards from that? And you can think about that in any way. So any of those target audience that you want to reach, like back to Mrs. Jones, that she comes to do garden cleanup at your school because one of your goals is to have 50 more local people who live in your neighborhood to come support this school. Your goal could be 25% increase of your, in Arizona with the Arizona education, donation tax. So think of what those would be. What would those highlights and goals be? And they don't even have to be gigantic. You could just say, like, I want 3 more people to show up at our next parent teacher night. I want, it could be small, but once you build that, then you can think, how do I move backwards from that? And then how do I get to that goal? And I think I mentioned when I first started, like, I'm 6 months out all the time. I'm always working backwards on like how to achieve those things. And so I think maybe if an educator has those half an hours, then I think they steal one of those and they spend some time, quiet time, maybe in a park with some coffee, and think about what are those lofty goals in a quiet space, or even asking some of the other educators, like, if we could improve anything by X, what would excite you the most, and what would you want to jump in and help with? Because then when you've got a posse and you've got buy-in, it's much easier to achieve those goals when you've got a tribe who wants to help you be successful as well.
And I'm imagining that in virtually any goal that we're going to have as a school, it's going to require other people's support to make it happen. And so when just thinking about, okay, well, what is that goal? How do I want these people to help us do that? When they're actually here, what is it that we're doing? The content almost plans itself, or at least the messaging almost writes itself when we're clear about what we're hoping happens and what and how we'd like people to participate.
Yeah, and then you also find people who, not everybody's going to be passionate about the Arizona tax return. They're not, but they might be really excited about having more parents show up, and art teachers more excited about more parents showing up to a showcase day. And so they're going to be very passionate about that. And then you might find out that people in the kitchen, cooking the lunches or whatever, are really excited about art day too. And then you get them on board, and then they help you get to your goal. So nobody works in a vacuum. It's not possible in our world anymore.
Oh my goodness. Well, Theresa, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for sharing your experience with the listeners. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed our show. And I hope you reach out to me or Theresa with your thoughts in our conversation. You can find Theresa on LinkedIn. And the link is going to be in the show notes for sure. And you can find me on Instagram at TGS Educational Consulting and on the web at www.tgseducationalconsulting.com. We're absolutely grateful for your likes, follows, and comments here on YouTube and on Instagram. But until next time, may you have as many opportunities to be as good and generous to yourself as you are with those that you serve.